Right, so welcome everyone. It is 3 o'clock. Again, we're a very, very small group. I think there was a bit of a mix-up when we sent out the invitations. Um, because I'm not sure if they actually went out yesterday. So that might be a reason why we ended up with such a small group. However, we are still going to go ahead with this because the great thing is we are going to have a video at the end of the day, which we will then be able to refer to at a later stage again. So my name is Jaco van der Kerk, Cape Wineland's e-learning advisor, and what we want to look at today is gamification, but we're going to have a specific look at a tool called Gimkit. Now, again, what we've done in this session is a little bit different because we're such a small group. Your mics are active. You can unmute yourself and ask questions as we go. Please make use of this opportunity and that you get to ask these questions so that we can really kind of get everyone on board with what is going on here. There are very few things that I've gotten so excited about in terms of e-learning as this tool. So before we can get to the tool, however, we need to look a little bit at the theory behind what we are dealing with here. And I often think this is something that is overlooked. So before we get to gamification, let's just look at game-based learning and what on earth we are talking about when we talk about game-based learning. Right, so when we talk about game-based learning, we're talking about the idea of learning through the immersion in a gaming environment. So when we talk about immersion, we mean that someone becomes literally involved in every level in a gaming environment. In a simple sense, when someone is playing games and there are elements of learning involved, then they are actually going through the process of game-based learning, playing a game and learning through this. So there are lots of examples, but whenever I think of game-based learning, there's always this example of Right. So whenever I talk about game-based learning, I always think back of this game you can see in front of you. Some of you might look at this and think, what on earth is he talking about? What is he thinking? Sorry, it's a bit pixelated. You struggle to find it a lot. But this is an example of a game called The Incredible Machine. Now, the purpose of the game is it gave you a bunch of different problems that you need to solve by putting various objects in play that would solve the puzzle. So this is an example of a puzzle. And if I look at this, I imagine what the job would be of being to get this balloon into this glass container. That's what I kind of think if I look at this. But what would happen is I would give you a few items and then mostly a blank canvas. But then from there, you need to figure out how you can make this work. So you typically start off with this ball is going to start rolling. It'll trigger this mouse trap, which will activate this pulley and let's pull this up, and then the cannon is going to fire. I imagine it's going to go in there, through there, down this. There's a bucket that's going to go and swing this bucket, which will lock this ball, which will go over here, activate this punching glove, which will hit this kettle and cause steam it might actually just bounce over onto this point, which will again pull this lever, activating whatever this thing is, which will frighten this guy, and he was going to do that. Now, I don't really know what's going on here. I'm not sure. I'm also not sure what the point is of that. But the point I'm trying to make is this is a game I played when I was a kid. And I can still remember the mechanics involved in this thing. There's a lot of things that I did when I was a kid playing these kinds of games at school that I really can't remember. But I still remember a lot of the mechanics of this thing. And if you think about it, those things that I've been talking about now, this is problem solving. This is a perfect example of problem solving. This is an example of understanding basic physics. This is an example of understanding so many different concepts that are working together that are underpinning a curriculum but aren't necessarily involved in used to testing it. Now, I'm not advocating that we scrap tests and only play these games, even though that would be pretty cool. But there's a lot of value in what we can learn from this and how we can implement this. Now, another game that comes to mind that I played a lot, and I know one of my ex-colleagues, we spoke about this often, is a game called Civilizations, where you would build an empire, etc. And under all of that was a lot of history. I mean, I know he said he teaches history at high school. He said 90% of his history knowledge came from playing Civilizations and games like it, not from school. And for me, it's the same. It's exactly the same. I didn't have history at school, or I didn't have history past grade one at least, but still I've got quite a good knowledge in terms of history from playing a game. Now, the most modern one, and maybe some of you were in the training sessions as well, is Minecraft. And I mean, there are lots of other ones, but Minecraft, again, it's a case of a little character that has to go around and harvest resources and use these resources to build houses and cities and whatever he can build with it. But there's a lot of micro skills that are happening. There's a lot of small moments of maths, of science, of planning, of all sorts of problem solving that's happening when we are playing these games. Now, we also have to be realistic in that we aren't in a position to go and program any of these games ourselves. That's not going to happen. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to really integrate all of these things into our learning. So where are we going with this? Now, game-based learning, I've often viewed something that is very important to take note of because of what we can learn from it, the concepts that we can take from game-based learning and how we can apply it to what we do. Because at the end of the day, maybe you're in a different position, but not many of us have a skill set required to build these kinds of things. But what we can do is we can get to this concept of gamification. So gamification is, some people call it game-based learning light, where we take concepts from gamification and we start applying it to learning. Now, this we can do because there's a lot of great tools out there that allow us to do this, and that's what we're going to be looking at. And Gimkit is one of those examples. And I trust that you're going to learn some of the things that we can do with it. But what made these things, these games, and playing these games, what made them effective? What made them interesting and intriguing for learners to work with? At the end of the day, before we get to that, what are the elements of playing games that we want to apply to learning, and what made it effective for us to learn in that way? So the first thing is there are points involved. But these points are not like marks that we get for tests, because somehow they're more exciting than getting marks. Because I know some people have in the past said, but kids write tests and there are marks involved, so what's the difference? But points are more fun. I'm not sure why, but there's a way of keeping score, keeping track of how you are doing. And what's great about it is when we're scoring points and when we're keeping track, it's a live process. It's not something that happens after the whole thing. That's the difference between keeping score and being assessed. If we're keeping score, we'll continually see what happens, not at the end of the day. Imagine you go out and play a soccer match or a rugby match or a cricket match, whatever you want to play, and no one tells you who's winning until the very end. Then they'll say, right, Team A, you won. Congratulations. If Team B realizes that they are losing, then Team B would surely try harder to catch up to Team A. And that's kind of the competition element that comes in. Because we are looking at scoring points and keeping track of these things, the competition element comes into play so that you want to be able to score more points than the other person. But because we are keeping track of it live, it's easier to it's not a guessing game. You don't sit back and you're not sure where you are, you're not sure what's going on, all those things. So that's a very important element of gamification. The scoring of points, the competition element, and then there are rules. And these rules are going to essentially determine how we score the points. And this might sound like a funny thing, but I've always said one of the great things about rules is it takes creativity to figure out to which point you can push these rules to try and get enough points, because that also requires problem solving and interesting approaches to things. But there are rules that are involved, and these rules define how these different games work. So these are three core elements of gamification that we're looking at. scoring points, competition, and rules. But again, I suppose one of the most effective parts of it is this idea of competition, that thing that arrives. Now, I don't know if it was right. What I did is something that I used to do in my classroom, and I found it worked very well when I was a teacher. At the end of the term, I usually have a list of the top achievers in my class, without the marks, of course, just a list of names. And then in the second term, I would flip that around and I would have a list of the most improved learners in the class, because we don't want the top 10 learners the whole time. In term three, I would have some other random statistics. So it keeps on changing, etc. But just that kind of desire to have your name on the board for whatever it is that you're getting your name on the board for, the best handwriting, I made up random things sometimes. But it just gave an element of the learners wanting to achieve. Now, we do that, we keep score, but we often end up keeping score with one metric and one metric alone, and those are the marks that the learners achieve. And that becomes a bit boring because it seems like the same people are always going to be in that position. So we need to get creative when we do this. So how does gamification actually help? What is the impact that you have in your classroom? It's going to differ from learner to learner. So you have to understand some kids are really motivated by competition or have incredibly competitive spirits. Other kids don't. Other kids are not bothered by having a competitive nature. I'm going to show you something that you've got in Gimkit that I think is such a cool twist on that concept as well. But so it's going to work in different levels for different learners. But the one thing that you will get is engagement. Learners will be more engaged. So then they are just doing, I'm going to say boring work, but let's call it spade. Not the exciting thing that we could do. So you will get engagement. You'll get competition, and the competition is going to drive excellence. Unfortunately, we've seen this over and over again. The competition does drive excellence. And this is a key thing that I want to stop here quickly. We will get feedback. So I often talk about, in other sections that I've had in the past, I often talk about the feedback loop. I didn't include it in the slide, but essentially when we're talking about the feedback loop, we're talking about the time that it takes for a learner to be assessed to find out where the gaps in knowledge are. Now, typically what happens here is if you take homework as a feedback loop, we would send our learners on the homework, they'll go send it home, they'll answer the questions, and then maybe we've got time the next day and we'll go through the homework with them and we'll see what they did wrong. So there's a feedback loop that's happening over there. It's not slow, it's not fast, it just kind of is what it is. Then we've got tests, which is a more formal kind of feedback loop, but it's essentially the same thing. We have our learners sit down, they write tests. What's the purpose of the test? And I think we don't really get that always, because the purpose of the test is supposed to be twofold. On the one hand, the learner is supposed to know, or it's supposed to find out what they don't know, and the teacher is supposed to find out what they don't know, so that there can be some form of correction happening. But that doesn't happen. We teach content, then we test the content, then we get the result, and we move on to the next content. So there's a massive issue in a feedback loop. Now, any kind of digital quizzing that we do, whether it's gamification, whether it's different kind of visual assessment, gives us this feedback, and it makes this feedback immediate. Because at the end of the day, once they've completed their quiz, they know, once you're answering questions, you know immediately if you get it right or wrong. The teacher can immediately see how well the learners are doing, right? So that is such a powerful element that goes overlooked when we look at the assessment, is the feedback element that we can get, right? But there's only really one way to see what we're about. So please get your phones out. We're going to play Gimkit for the next 5 minutes. I've set the timer for 5 minutes. It is a general knowledge thing, so please get your phones out. Enter the address gimkit.com/join, and then that is the code that you need to use. I'm going to be playing with you. It is a general knowledge one that I did not check beforehand, so I don't know the answers. I might do well, I might not do well. We'll see what happens. So I'm just going to leave that on the board for a minute or two, so that you're able to join the class. As soon as we've got a couple of people in, We will start. You can join a little late as well. You just miss out on the first few minutes. When it asks for your name, you don't have to give your personal name, but you can if you want to. It really depends on what you want to do. We're going to look at that as well a little bit later, how that element works. Right. So you'll see if you're actually in, if you're those of you that might be in already on your phone, I see it's only myself and Candace that are in yet so far. And then Jane has entered, then Emmy that's entered. I'm going to pull this over to the main screen soon, just giving everyone time to enter. So you'll see it kind of creates this little fun thing that you can draw pictures and things like that while you're writing, if you want to, just to kind of entertain you. Don't worry, none of that really matters all that much. So if you want to play, draw a little heart, etc., it's just a random fun thing that I've included while we wait. So I think enough of you have joined the game. We are going to start. So now I'm starting the game. I'm not going to really explain this. I want you to experience it. So go and answer the questions and see what happens. Right, this was just a randomly chosen one, so now while you are playing this, I want to just show you something else. Let's see if anyone can. Oh, they Emma's taken has beaten me again. Let's just go over again. Now, what I want you to also have a look at, every time that you actually score something, there's an option that says shop. You've got 2 minutes or so. Go check it out, what the shop thing also does. Right, I see no one's really gone into the shop yet. Right, so just, I can't pause again, so if I just quickly focus on the screen again and stop playing on your phones for a second. What I want to show you here quickly, when we've got this how many days in the war, every question I answer, I have 2 options. I hope you're all paying attention. So I can either shop or I can click and continue. So if you go to shop, just to show you some of the cool little elements that they brought into this, you can actually have a number of different things that you can upgrade. Now, once your kids start understanding these things, it gets really fun. So you can have this money per question upgrade. you can have a streak bonus, you can have a multiplier, or insurance. Now, these things are all going to change how much money you're getting. Are people still answering here? Right? So this can actually influence how much money you get. But when it gets really fun is when you start looking at these things, power ups and themes. Well, not the themes. So they're just the power ups really. Themes are part of the powerful version. So here with power ups, you can see I get all sorts of other things that I can do. So like this minute to win it, do double your earnings. Answer frees other players. They won't be able to answer questions of minute to shop for 15 seconds. So I can do that, and there I've got it, and I'm just going to ice everyone. So now I choose who to ice. I'm going to ice N because she is catching up to Yaku, so I'm going to stop her. Just to give you a sense of the things that you can do. With the first person walking good, Armstrong, we'll go back into the shop. And there's lots of little cool elements to the game that we've got like that. Right, so I'm 10th, doing very well. I actually only answered 2 questions correctly. And here I can, as the host of this thing, see how these people did. Right, now I want to show you here, there's an option as well to say view report. We're kind of working this thing the wrong way around to a certain extent because I wanted to show you what the game was like, that you have a quick experience of it, and now we're going to look at the mechanics of how does this thing actually work, because it is actually really straightforward and easy to get this thing set up. So when we click on view report, right, view report will immediately show me the number of questions that people answered correctly, the number of questions that people answered incorrectly. It doesn't give us, well, we can get way more detailed view on things. Let's go on this Yaku. Here I can actually get a sense of whether or not which questions we answered correctly. So you can get very granular and very detailed with all of these things. You can really go into lots of detail. Now, what you also notice here, if I go to the student overview, that I can't remember who, I'm not sure if I finished first, my one, over here. I actually only answered 14 questions. Then answered 45, but was still second. So that adds another cool element to this of the gamification. The only reason why I finished so high up is because I very quickly went and bought 1 or 2 power-ups because I started with some money, bought some power-ups, and immediately I put them in front. And then immediately I could do it quickly. Now, I'm going to get back to some of these mechanics later as we move through the game. But there's a lot of this that I like that I think works very well. One of the key things of this gamification that I think is different from other gamification things that you might have seen, like Kahoot is, I think, one of the most well-known ones. But what I like about this thing is it is not about speed. It is about accuracy. So this example that you have now was maybe not the best one because there was usually one answer that stood out as the obviously correct answer. But this whole thing is about accuracy. It's not about speed, it's about accuracy. So you would have noticed, those of you who got questions wrong, you go on a streak. And then after you've gone on a streak, once you get the answer wrong, your streak stops and you actually lose. Now, I think that means there's more emphasis put on the accuracy of answering the questions than the speed. And sometimes I've seen these things, it's all about how quickly you can do stuff. The guy who's the fastest can get the most done, and that's not the case here. So, with that said, let's actually look at the mechanics. How do I make this thing work? How do I create a Gimkit, and how does the whole thing actually work? So, first and foremost, you're going to have to go to the website gimkit.com. Now, if you haven't joined before, mine is obviously going to log in automatically. It just takes me to this panel. If you have not connected yet, all that you need to do is you go to Gimkit and then you say sign up or register or whatever the case might be. I tend to just register with my Google accounts. It's the easiest way to do things these days. So I just register with my Google account, and then from there you get to this point where you are now. Now, one of the things that's important to know about Gimkit, I'm just going to quickly maximize things here. One of the important things to note about Gimkit is for a very long time, because it's been around for a while and I've known about it for a while, but I've always liked it, but the problem is this little, you are limited on the free plan Gimkit Basic. It used to be a big headache because the basic Gimkit was incredibly limited in what it offered you. What they've done is they've opened this up significantly to the point where you can now use it quite well on the free version. The paid for version is definitely better. It's got a couple of really important things that it can do that you can't do in the free version. But the free version is still a fantastic tool on its own. But I will, as I said, we'll mention one or two things about that. So once you are over here in your Gimkit, if you want to get going with your Gimkit, or if you want to start, the easiest place to start is just to go here to search kits. The search kits allows you to go and search for all the Gimkits that people have created. So if I click on search kits, I'm going to say, for example, Romeo and Juliet. I'm an English teacher. I always refer to these guys. So Romeo and Juliet, here we go. Well, if I hover over any of these, it gives me the it tells me what is in this quiz, right? Now, often you'll see many of them are kind of the same things, and we'll get to that now. But I can go hover over any of these ones and just click on one and say, right, I like this one. I'm going to use this one. Click on it, you find it, and here are your tools. Questions and answers, play, export, share, copy, flag. So immediately you can get to it. It is as simple as that. From that point, we can go into this play option, and then we can play a Gimkit. So let's go through that process. We first want to have a look at the process of how do we play a Gimkit that's been made by someone else. Then we'll have a look at how do we make a Gimkit, and then we're also going to look at a couple of other very cool features that we have. So once we found a Gimkit that we like, so I like this one. We've got first question is comparing what is it simile, who killed Tybalt. I can click on it. Paris, what does Juliet mean when she says, oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? So a bunch of the generic questions that you might expect to find in a Romeo and Juliet quiz. There are 48 of them, so thank you very much, Kari Perna has done the legwork for us. We're just going to use this one. So now I'm going to click on play. So when I click on play, it opens up this little window. We're first only going to focus, we'll see if we have time to get to the others, but I just want to focus on the classic mode, because that's what we played now. Which is the right one. We played the classic mode, which is the one that you're probably going to use the most. Teams mode, I haven't really played this before, but teams mode, I think you kind of pool your resources. You're welcome to have a go and try it. It's a bit difficult for me to try out on my own because you need a minimum of 8 players that are participating in this. So I haven't really looked at team mode. I'm just going to look at classic mode. If we get time, we'll get to Fishtopia as well, which is very, very cool. So then what you do is you just select the one that you want to play. We want to play the classic mode. We're going to say continue. Right, and then, I'm not sure what I'm saying that. Right, so we pick the classic mode, then we need to set up our game. So the first thing we have to do is we define how long this game is going to be. And this is one of the mechanics of this tool that is quite different from, I think, other gamification things. Quiz things in general is the length of the game is not determined by the number of questions, but by time. So what would happen is if I set 50 questions and a learner has answered all 50 questions, it starts reciting those questions. So you can theoretically go and set up a 50-question quiz that you will have your learners answer, and then give them 20 minutes. So you know they're going to get through all 50. But what's great about that is once they get to that question the second time, hopefully if they got it wrong the first time, it starts sticking. and they start kind of remembering it. It's also an encouragement of not trying to rush through all 50 questions, but rather focusing on getting the right accuracy. So there are other modes as well, and one of the other modes is this race mode. So race mode, if you select race mode, then what you do is you set a target. So the first one to get to $250,000 was. So everyone just races to get there. Now, remember when we spoke about those kids who are not that keen on this whole competition thing? They might like this one, all in. So it becomes a challenge for the whole group. You say, right, all of us, we're going to see if we can get to $5 million and how long that's going to take. So this is especially cool if you've got multiple classes that are all going to do the same thing. And you have the classes, and you put the classes against each other. And you say, so ultimately we can see who can get to this $5 million first, and go. So just kind of different ways of going about it. Then over here you can set the starting cash. So you can either say, look, you guys are going to start with nothing, everyone needs to work their way up from zero, or you can say we're going to start with like 100, which gives them the option to buy a few power-ups when they get going, depending on how you want to set up your game. Again, I think one of the cool things about this is you can set up your Gimkit in a number of different ways to have a number of different experiences for the learners. Then answer checking. Now, this is one that really it's going to depend on the type of questions you have. If you have them answer 20 questions and you're going to give them lots of time to answer it, so it's going to recycle, then maybe you don't want to activate this. Maybe you want to leave it off so that they see they got it wrong and to try and figure out what it could be. Most of the time, I'm a fan of leaving it on because I think that informal assessment, this gamification model we have over now, is all about the learner knowing what they got wrong. So I think it's good for them to see what they got wrong. And then if you want to add a couple of more things, I'm not going to go through everything. And it's clean power-ups. Remember, I used that ice mode and I froze the one player so that she had to stop for a few seconds. So the clean power-ups, you can switch those off, but this is quite a cool trick with clean power-ups because remember, if one person is racing ahead, the rest of the class can say, wait, everyone, throw power-ups at that person, stop her or stop him. So that's quite a cool little element that you could add to the game. Then, because kids will be kids, sometimes they'll go and join using certain names. The nickname generator will prevent that from happening, but that also means you won't know who actually did what. I know in my classrooms, when I use these types of games, not this one because I couldn't use this when I was still teaching. I generally just tell the kids to use random names, don't use your own name because they get a little bit. Sometimes they don't like them when people are born, especially if it's at the bottom. So nicknames are quite a good way of keeping your learners anonymous, and then obviously joining late. That's pretty straightforward. So once I've got my game mode set to the way that I want it, then I go over here, continue, and we'll take you to the next step, which is essentially setting up the game for you. And it's as simple as that. And there we are. So now all you need to do is once the people have joined, and please don't grab your phones and join this game now. Once the people have joined, then we just say start. I can't start the game if it's empty. And then we play the game. It really is as straightforward as that to set up a game of Gimkit. Now, getting your learners to join, when you do this the first time around, I promise you it is going to be a bit of a headache because Gimkit does not like other tools have an app for the phone. You have to enter this URL. There's no other way to get to it. Gimkit.com/join. However, what you can do, what actually works quite well, is if I just click on this code, this 958612, it immediately copies it to my clipboard. So if I'm using WhatsApp Web as an example, or maybe I've got Google Classroom, or whatever way it is that you want to communicate with your learners, you can just post that link on there, they can click on it and then jump straight into the game. So that works quite well when you want to do it that way around. You can play this on a computer, as you've seen. It works very well in cell phone, and I'm sure you've all experienced as well. So how you integrate and how you use it is entirely up to you. And then I've got my game set up, and then I'll just run my game and sit back and watch how the learners kind of struggle with us and figure out what's going on, etc., etc. Like any tool, The first time you're going to use it, there will be bumps and bruises. They might be a little confused about what exactly they're supposed to do. So obviously, guide them through the process. But the more you use things like this, and if you have used things like this in the past, they will naturally take to it and be able to use it easily and effectively. So it's a great, it really is a great way to get engagement going. But what happens if you want to set up a quiz and the things that you want aren't there? We are a predominantly Afrikaans district in the Cape Winelands. And if you go on here and you search for Afrikaans things, you won't find a lot. I mean, I look for Afrikaans, there's almost nothing on here. What you also have to understand, when I search for kids, Gimkit isn't nearly as big as some of the competitors. There aren't nearly as many pre-made quizzes on here as you find on Kahoot or on Quizzes or on Quizlet. So it's not as big as the others are. It's growing, but it's not there yet. So you might not really enjoy the things that you find, and you might want to set up your own one. So how do we set up our own one? Right, so I'm not going to use this one. I want to go back to the home. I'm going to create a new kit. One thing I can tell you here, cosmetics, you can just ignore cosmetics. It's part of the paid for program, so I'm not really going to go into that. Upgrade, I think you can all understand what upgrade is. And me, it's just my profile, how my profile works, and things like that. So I'm not going to go into any detail there. So let's get to this really important step of how do we create our own Gimkit and not just use the ones that have been set up for us already. So I'm going to click on New Kit. I'm going to have a few basic fields that I need to complete. Over here, I enter the name, the language, the subject. I just realized that I haven't actually taken any pauses so far in the training whatsoever. Let me just pause for a second and say, are there any questions? Are there any comments? Anything anyone would like to add? See, the chat is empty, and I see no one's unmuting themselves. Are you all still with me? Can someone just give me an indication that you are still there? Right, I trust I haven't been talking to myself for 30 minutes. Candace. Right, so remember when you said, so when you say you started, you signed in, where is this dashboard? Let me just quickly close a couple of things here. Right, so when you signed in, remember that before you can get to that dashboard, to anything like that, we are first going to have to kind of say play. So the very first thing before you get to that is you click on play live or any quiz that you have, and that gets you to this dashboard. Yes, there is a attendance register. I'm going to share that at the end again. So maybe do you not see this create or this new kit button over here? Is that the problem? Is anyone else experiencing that same issue? Because I am on a free system. Did we log in? Or we need to sign up or something like that? You are also welcome to unmute yourself. Let me just show you if I go from right at the beginning. I'm just going to log out quickly here. So if I log out and I get to the Gimkit homepage, okay. Right, so if I get to the Gimkit homepage, it looks like this. This is what it's going to look like the first time that you get here. And it's a little bit annoying, honestly, honest. When I get to gimkit.com, it doesn't, the cookies aren't working well. It's not really moving, so I have to log in every time. But if you haven't logged in yet, you're going to go here to sign up, and then you're going to go through the sign up process. As I said, it's what's the easiest thing is just use your account to sign up for that. And then once you have one, you're going to use this login. Thing. One of the funny things about Gimkit, it's weird, I don't know why they do it like this, but kids get stuck on the fact that they enter this address, they go to this gimkit.com, right? So they'll go to gimkit.com and they'll end up here, and they don't know where to join because the join game button is not particularly big. So then there is the key. So that's why it's important to make sure they enter the whole address, which is gimkit.com/join. But anyway, let's go on. I'm going to log in. So when you log in, you can just say continue with Google if you've already signed up. I'm going to say continue with Google. It's going to go do some little things in the background. It's going to see, I've got a Google account. It's using, and then I'm back in. So there we go. Gimkit. Let's go through the process of creating Gimkit. So we're going to have to give it a name. I'm going to call this one a name. I'm going to have to give it a language. We'll call it. We have to choose the language, by the way. That's the other thing I forgot. So you'll see Afrikaans is there. It basically goes through the normal languages that you've got because it has a list, so you can actually set any language that you want. Let's just use English for an example. And then the subject, you can pick the subject that you want. This isn't really that important because I haven't found that the categorization of things on Gimkit is that great. So it's not that important, but still, select one that's appropriate and then we'll go. So then it asks you to use an image. You can use any of these images in Unsplash. So I can look for e-learning as an example and then find nothing it seems. Right, so learning. I'm just going to use a random one here. Just pick that one. Or of course, you've got the option, if there's a specific image that you want to use for some reason, you can import that using a link. So you're going to go onto the link, you're going to right click, copy image URL or copy image address, and then use that. Okay, so when we create our own Gimkit, there's a couple of options that we have. So our first option, and I think this is a pretty straightforward one, is to add a question. Right, here we've got one, create with flashcards. We've got Collab, which I think is the most awesome thing ever, and I will be using this thing the whole time if I was in the classroom. And then we've got question bank and we've got import from the spreadsheet. So we'll go through these one by one to just give you a sense of how they work. The most basic one, add a question. It's pretty straightforward. We click on add a question. There's the question. So I'm going to say, this is the question. Well, let's make it a typical question. What day of the week is it? And we're going to say Monday, we're going to say Tuesday, we're going to say Wednesday, and we're going to say Thursday. Right? So yeah, I've got my options and I just pick which one is correct. You can have multiple answers that are correct if you wanted to. And you can also have photos as options. So you can say, I'm going to remove this answer and replace this with a photo. And then again, find the photo. One thing that you need to take note of, though, of these three options. Unsplash is working fine. The link is working fine. But your upload option is not going to work because this is a paid for option. Right, so you won't be able to upload an image when you do this. There has to be an Unsplash and there has to be a link, but you can't upload something, unfortunately. Right, so there are a couple of restrictions like that when you get to do this. So I think for a foundation phase, as an example, it would be great having a wording for pictures, or which one doesn't fit, and you've got three dogs and a cat. Three different dog breeds and a cat. So things like that could work really well if you go through the process of setting these things up for your learners. And I mean, this could work up until your high school as well. You're talking about identify which one of these which one of these clouds is I can't remember the different cloud types, but I think you get the drift of what I'm talking about here. You can use this, add a photo over here so that your question is not in fact a word, but an image. This is great for maths if you want to add a maths equation in there. So then you've got an image of your maths as an example. You can't add audio on the free version, only the paid for version. So you can't actually go and ask the question and then listen to you asking the question and then respond. That would be pretty cool. But that is on the paid for version. Then you've also got this option of text input. So let's just quickly, we're just going to say we are happy with this one, right? So, sorry. We're going to say this is the first question, first answer, second, fourth. Right, and then when you're done, you just click add. So yeah, I've got my first question. If I click on it, it's not a great question, but it's a question at least. So once I have a question done, you've always got the option to either go and edit it over here, or you can also make a copy of it over here. So if I've got a thing that's going to be repeating itself all the time, then I copy that and I go and edit it and I say, this is now the second question and the answer is second, not first anymore. And I say save. Now, what you can also do when you add a question, and you have the option to have text input as well. So we're going to say, what is your favorite day? And then obviously the answer is going to be Saturday, or in this instance, Gimkit day. Right, but be careful. Whenever you've got something like this, remember that if someone were to write Gimkit day lowercase, they'd be wrong. So you need to, I always say, add a few options, what it could be, and it could also be something like Gimkit out the exclamation mark. Now, I haven't tested this, so it might be that it's not case sensitive. Some things are doing it these days, which is great. But most of them usually, those would be 3 different answers, which kind of look the same, but they're not quite the same. So when you are going to use text input, be careful of making sure that you write it in a way, in multiple ways, if it needs to be done in a certain way. All right. Then we're going to add that. So we've got 3 questions already. I can go and find out how any of these work if I want to, or go and, sorry, now I highlighted it by accident. Right. So there are my questions. The order does not matter because Gimkit, as far as I know, shuffles your questions anyway. What's great about that is 2 kids sitting next to each other will not be answering the same question. So it's going to be shuffling these questions for the learner. So it's not necessarily going to follow a certain order. Then, if we go to this create with flashcards, when you do this, this is more to do with linking with other tools and other systems that you might have. So if you want to create these little flashcards, I'm not going to go into detail with these flashcards. It's something that you can experiment with. I think there are other tools that also do the flashcard thing that do it better than Gimkit. So I'm not a big fan of the way that they do it. Maybe you find it works very well for you. So go and explore it, go and see how it works on your own. And then again, with flashcards, if you've got other tools that are creating flashcards, like Quizlet, for example, that does flashcards, the import function is always quite nifty for that. I'm going to leave this Kit Collab for last. And you'll see why I really like this tool. But then we've also got this option to add from question bank. And this is becoming a very popular and quite common trick in the EdTech tools these days, where I can now go and search for, let's search for Theta this time. Right, let's search for Theta, and here I find the Theta. So here's one with 42 questions. So when I see the 42 questions, if I hover over it, it will automatically display on the right, and I can now go and decide I'm going to add whichever one I want. So which quote displays foreshadowing? There's 4 quotes that they have, 2 of them are foreshadowing. I like that question. A cuckold is, what is it? It is a man. Yes, that is correct. Themes of Othello include, now I don't know that. Desdemona is submissive, disloyal, innocent, rude, maybe. The song Widow. So you see what I mean. I pick and choose the questions that I like, and then once I'm done with one, I just move on to another one. So let's have a look at how this one is. True or false? Desdemona's tragic flaw could be her innocence. Is it true or false? Yes, it is true. True or false? We are still alive at the end of the play. This is false. So you see how quickly I can just build these really complicated quizzes. Then what I can also do is, if I like this one, for example, and I scroll through and think, okay, this one works, I'm just going to take all of them, add all the questions. And can you see how quickly I've built a pretty comprehensive Gimkit for myself here, with lots of questions. That's already just part of it. And that is how quick you can put these things together. Again, it's a very simplistic system, and I like it. I like the fact that it keeps things pretty straightforward and simplistic. Now, the last trick that I want to show you, and you're going to have to refer to the Teams chat in a second, because I'm going to post a link over there, is this Collaborate with Kit Collab. So what Kit Collab allows you to do is, I'm going to enable Kit Collab, and it creates a link that I can now send to people. Specifically, the idea is send it to your students so that they get this link and they are now going to make up their own questions. Right? So there's the link. I'm pasting it in the chat. I want you to go onto this and create a few questions for me. I'm going to give you a minute or two to try and ask a few questions. See what you would like to ask over there. See when you pop up. I'll show you how that part works. Right, is anyone gonna? Right, I'm just gonna add one from my end. It does not need to be a brilliant question. It can just be a very straightforward, simple question. Right, what is the square root of 64? Now, let me give you another minute if anyone else wants to add a question. You can add more questions if you want, Candice. I see Candice is adding a question. Right, there we've got Nathan. When is the June holidays? It should have started. Right. So when you get these questions, what I want to show you quickly is what's cool about it is none of these questions are put into my Gimkit to start with. I can choose which ones I like. So let's say this one, Jaco has just been silly. This is a stupid question. I'm just going to reject it. Goes away. Candice asked a very sensible question. I'm going to add it to my Gimkit. I like it. There is one I'm going to add, but now I'm going to say, okay, so I've added these questions, and the new questions all go to the top, by the way. But I'm just going to edit this question, and because she's not quite right with this answer, and it really, because she misspelled should, which she shouldn't do. It should have started it there, and then I just kind of fix it quickly. So I can, even if there are tiny mistakes, I can add them to the thing. Now, what you need to imagine is if you're sitting with 40 learners in the class, and you open this Kit Collab, and you tell them, right, everyone contribute 2 questions, or everyone contribute 3 questions. I can't remember the exact underlying theory of that, but there's so much learning that is happening as that child is trying to come up with a question and possible answers. Because remember, if your kids understand how the system works, they will realize that they need to ask a question that is difficult enough that the classmates won't just be able to answer it easily, but it's still doable, it is still accurate, that it can be part of this whole thing. Because it gives them the advantage that they know the answer while the others don't know the answer. So the more you kind of get them used to this thing, the better they will become at it. And again, as I said, that process of trying to come up with a question, what they are doing is they're actually flipping through all of their content knowledge to think about what question they could pose. And if all of them are doing it, at the same time, we're going to come up with a set of questions that are essentially the things that are actually challenging to your learners. And you don't even have to do it yourself, right? So collaborate with Collab. I hope you understand why, and see there's some more stuff that's coming in. I haven't even seen you do it. So it's quite cool because I'm now working on these things and I see there's this little 2 indicating that there's more stuff that's coming. So I can click on this. What is CNR, coding and robotics? Coming read, right? So add to kit, that's a cool one. How many letters in the alphabet? 26, add to kit, that's a cool one. Right, and there you go. And once you need to turn it off, you can just disable your code in your Kids Collab, right? Or if you feel like, hey, there's some people entering stuff where they shouldn't be entering things, then you can disable it. And they don't actually need a Gimkit account to be able to do this. When you use Kids Collab, it's open to anyone with their own account. So it's an incredibly cool tool, I think, to use in the classroom. I know it's something when you get closer to exam time, when you get closer to that revision time, it's just a way more fun way of doing revision this way around than what we sometimes do in the classrooms. Right. So when all is said and done, there's one last option here that I'm not really going to go into. It becomes a lot more technical, this import from Spreadsheet, but this is also an option. So you can use this import from Spreadsheet, which will allow you then to use a Google Sheet, or you're going to have to download it as a CSV file. And so you'll be struggling with CSV files that are in this group, but you download it as a CSV file and then you upload it and it automatically creates your Kids Collab. So this is useful for when you are trying to link different tools with each other. I think it's Quizzes and Quizlet both have the option to export a set of questions. So you will be able to export those questions into an Excel sheet, save it as a CSV file, and then upload it to Gimkit. But that becomes a bit more complicated. We don't want to get into all of that. Then we say we're all done. We're happy. It works. We've got our, I can't remember naming it that, we've got that quiz. It's set up for us to play. And it's done. And I can say play live. But I think a good idea when you start doing it, because when I start scrolling down, this becomes quite a few. I don't have all of many, but you can see I have them, and I've also been meeting things as I'm going beyond it. But what I only actually figured out today is you can categorize these things as well. So they all fall into this big giant pool over here called kits at the moment. But we can actually move them into these folders called, this one I called example kits. And in order to do that, all that we need to do is over here is a little button with 3 dots. Now, just a tip from my side, these are the first things that I look for. I look for these little buttons because those are the ones we always miss that allow us to do those little tricks that we want to be able to do. So over here, I've got this option of saying add to folder. I click add to folder, and I'm going to just create a new folder. I'm going to call it my awesome kit collabs. Right, so there I've got my awesome kit collabs, and now you'll see there I've got my one file is in there. But what I want to show you here, I can actually also do this. I can add it to a folder, and I can choose example kits. So now this kit exists in my just general everything folder. So everything is over here. So I've got that. Let me just redraw the arrows quickly. So this one is in here because everything is in that folder, but I've also moved it into example kits and I've moved it into my Ultimate Kit Collab. So if you've got I know for languages as an example, there are some things that are universal that kids kind of struggle with from grade 8 all the way to grade 12. So I can set up an active and passive kind of quiz for them in a way. I'm not sure how exactly you do that, but we go about doing that. But you'd set up a quiz and then you can move it into a grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 folder. You can have a basic subtraction, basic addition thing, and you can add that to a grade 3, 4, and 5 folder because you can move it across grades. It's just a cool way to kind of keep things a little bit more organized to know where everything is, these folders. Now, let's talk about the one. Right. Maybe the recording will be there because we're actually still getting to the cool part. As the amazing things, the cool part is still coming. There's one, before we get to those things, let's look at the one unfortunate bummer that we do have, and that is assignments are not available on the free version. So assignments would allow me to actually go and assign this as homework for my classes to do. So you can only imagine how much fun that would be if kids go home and they see, all right, I need to answer these questions. I've got 5 minutes, I've got 10 minutes. I need to see how much money you can make. Some things obviously go away, like the ability to negatively influence your teammates, things like that, or teammates or classmates. That goes away, but all the upgrades and those things are still there. But unfortunately, the free version doesn't allow for the assignments. And the paid version is not cheap. So unfortunately, you're going to have to, you might have to look at the free version. But up until now, everything we've done in the free version, so you can still get away with that, I think. Then the classes thing, now, from my honest view, if assignments don't work, then classes serve no purpose because the classes are specifically designed to be used with the assignments so that you can assign things to a class. If you do have this, you can import a class list from a Google Classroom class roster. So it'll just import those roles, invite all of them to join the classroom and join it. Well, the one thing that is quite cool about it is if you then play a live game and specifically assign it to a classroom, then when the learners join, they don't have to enter new names. So it's a bit of a schlep really for not all that much because we can't use assignments. So that's why I can't steer clear of that. Are there any questions at this point? Before we go into kind of the last little part of it that I want to show you, what you can also do. I think I've covered everything else that I wanted to cover. Yeah. Any questions? Right, so let's get to I think the really exciting part of what Gimkit can do as well. And I haven't explored it to the extent that I would love to explore it still, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to kind of explore these things as well. Now, there's also, when we say play live, what they've done is Gimkit have released multiple game modes. Now, how it works, and this is what's different from how it worked in the past. In the past, when you had the free version, or the free version, essentially all of them had the same limitation, and that was you could only have 5 players in the game, which made that it was great to see, to test and see what it was like, but you can't really use it in a classroom environment. Now what they've done is they've changed this to having a featured category. So over here is my featured category. Now, everything in the featured category is open to unlimited players. So we've got the classic mode, we've got the teams mode, and then we've got Fishtopia, are all available. This tool is called annotate.net, Shani. We've got a short little video on our e-learning training page that deals with it because If anyone were to ask me what is the one tool that you cannot live without, it will be cultivate.net. It is, I think, one of the coolest tools around. It is also, unfortunately, not a free tool. The free version, there is a free version, but the free version restricts you to only using a black marker and only being allowed to use a, I think, yellow highlighter. Maybe this highlighter really. It only allows you to use those tools. But the paid for version is 150 Rand a year, so it isn't that expensive. But I decided it costs about as much as whiteboard markers would cost, so it just made sense to me. But anyway, just to get back to, I'll post a link at a later stage in the chat for you, showing at the end of the session. So how this featured works is the featured is open to everyone. But then when you start scrolling down, you'll see there's also over here we get popular picks. So just capture the flag, tag, domination, trust no one. Scroll to the side, the floor is lava, humans versus zombies, draw that, what is infinity mode. I haven't played any of these, I'll be honest. I've always wondered what they are, because it looks quite cool, but the minute that it has this little star over there, that means it is 5 players max. Right. Now, I mean, you might be in the position where that's okay, because you are sitting in a classroom where you've got 5 tablets. And you might have lots of learners, but then you kind of get them to huddle around with tablets and do a collaborative exercise with this. You might be doing what I call the mode where you've got kind of station learning happening, when you've got 5 kids are working, or 10 kids are at one station, and then they share devices and they play these things. So there are ways that you can work around it and still use these in your classroom. You just need to be a little bit more clever about it. And you can see years like other classic twists, super rich mode, hidden mode, drain mode, etc., etc. Now, what I want to show you though is the Fishtopian mode, and how this works actually is this one, the featured one. So these will always be here. The classic mode and the teams mode. Those are always part of featured. So you won't have to worry that they won't be there. This one, however, is going to swap out. I'm not sure how often. I thought it was weekly, but this thing's been here for a while. So it might be on a monthly basis. It swaps it out with different game modes so that you can kind of experience what the other game modes are like. But I want to show you what this Fishtopia mode actually is, because I think this opens up your mind in terms of what you can do with it. Right, so we're going to play, which one did we pick? Let's pick one. Let's pick an easy one. Okay, I'm going to look for a subtraction. Right, addition and subtraction. Let's click on that one. No, that looks like I need to concentrate. I don't need to concentrate now. Right, we want to find a really easy one. Why is it giving me tricky ones here? Right, so addition. That looks nice and easy. Right, so this with regards to this filter, I want to show you, yeah, you could filter by language and by subject. But again, that's the sum total of how you can filter. So I can't filter by grade level. I can't find something appropriate to a 6 or 7 year old, which is what I'm looking for now. An easy one. So we're going to take this one, and I'm going to say this one looks good. I like it. I'm going to click on it, and I want us to play this one. And we're going to play it in Fishtopia mode. Right, so we're going to say continue. Let's make it 10 minutes because we need a little bit more time to explore this one. I'm just going to use the game generator. You will also notice that there are way fewer options to set here, right? So you actually don't get all those settings because they all have kind of custom things set to them. So now we're going to go into Fishtopia. If you want to join, I hope you know by now what you need to do. Grab your cell phone, enter gimkit.com/join, and then you're going to see the code on the screen. It's going to come up now. Right, so there's the code, 997517. I am this guy, Fushal one. Okay, that thing. All right, there's me walking around now. Instructions on. All right, did someone join me? Here's the character. All right, there's rose fruit. Hi, rose fruit. All right, we're trying to catch each other. I'm running away now. Right, so the code is going to remain active. I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to paste it in the chat on Teams. So those of you who want to go and join via that, get started. One person who joined us as well. Okay, the Silver Gecko, Silver Gecko. Right, so I'm going to start this now, and I want you to kind of try and understand how they are conceptualizing the learning that is taking place. So we'll start the game. You can join this. The code is 997517. Those might not be in it yet. 99. Experience that game that we played there, because ultimately what happened with that game is we completely had this engagement, this competition, and the feedback thing kind of fell apart because even one thing got kicked out. But at the end of the day, we have those key things that we want. That engagement was there, the competition was there, the feedback was there. But one of the great things about this competition, what I like about that kind of game, is it's a type of personal competition that you are running. You've seen anyone running around, so you see people are busy, but you are still kind of doing your own thing. And every single time, it keeps on coming back to the same thing: answering questions. So in that break between answering questions, going and fishing, and then selling your fish, and then buying power-ups, and doing all those other interesting things, your mind just gets a bit of a break. So you kind of answer questions, and then you just go away and just do a couple of things, and you come back and then you get some more bait, and then you just go on doing the same thing. Now, I haven't experimented with the other game modes, but the other game modes, I'm imagining, I have a similar kind of strategy about them. It's always going to come back to the same element of focusing on the questions. And remember, it doesn't matter which Gimkit I use. I could have used this one, or this one, or this one. Any of them I could have used in any of the game modes. So I don't need to set up something specific to create that kind of Fishtopia thing. So the bottom line of this gamification is, and just kind of to wrap up our session today, is it really is about taking the idea of learning, of consolidating content, adding some fun elements to it, so that you are still doing the learning, that the learning is still the center, most important thing that you're doing, but at the same time, it's kind of happening subconsciously, so that learners aren't feeling frustrated and aren't getting disinterested with the learning process that is happening, that they're constantly engaged with what they're doing. It's almost as if when we talk about gamification gives a purpose to getting the question right. Now, we know that in a test, there's a purpose to getting the questions right. And we would like to believe that in homework it's the same thing. But ultimately, if we think about it, getting your questions right for homework is really, it's only has to do with a learner's internal locus of what the thing is, but your internal locus of motivation. That is what drives you. That's where this gamification comes in, because now there's an external locus as well. There's an external desire to compete and to do well and that kind of thing. So I hope that this is giving you an interesting idea of what you could do. Please go have a look at other gamification tools that are out there. I've spoken about Kahoot a few times in the section. Kahoot is still the kind of grandfather of the digitized online gamification tool. And it's still a great tool if used correctly, if implemented in the right way. Kahoot can still be great. But again, it needs to be implemented in the right way for it to work. And that is, at the end of the day, up to us trying to make sure that we keep the learning and the fact that learning has to be at the forefront of what we do. And we always remember that and keep that in mind as we go through this. So we've got 5 more minutes left. Are there any questions? Because that brings us to the conclusion of this presentation. You're welcome to ask your questions in those 5 minutes.